there.
Okay. Hello, I'm Marilyn Dalrymple at the Boulevard Today Cafe at King's Photo Supply, and I have a very special guest with me today, Dr. Andrew Davidhazy, who teaches at Rochester Institute of Technology in New York. He's got some wonderful things to tell us about, and the first thing I want to ask him is, why are you here in Lancaster from New York?
Well, that's an interesting question. I normally wouldn't be here, but you have very important defense activities taking place in the neighborhood, Edwards Air Force Base, for example. And one of the companies that supports Edwards Air Force Base is Visual Instrumentation Corporation. And they're putting on a seminar for high-speed photographers, both local and national, at the company. And they invited me to come and give a presentation on high-speed applications that are used for weapons testing and so on.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing.
Why would they ask you to talk about high-speed photography?
Well, a lot of the events that contribute to making science possible happen in a very short period of time. So they're high-speed events. In order to visualize those so that you can understand the processes that happen, you need to use high-speed photography, either as stills or as motion pictures. So I particularly concentrate on still photography, high-speed pictures of bullets and explosions and so on. But the main interest of the seminar is in motion picture photography.
Oh, wow.
They take pictures rates at billions of pictures per second.
Wow.
To look at very, very fast events. And that's kind of a specialty of this part of the country, where all this defense activity takes place.
Okay. Along with your high-speed photography, you've done some amazing things in the past, and I say you invented them, and you say you didn't. But I think at least you brought them back to life. You found things that were done in the past and brought them back to life. Can you explain a couple of those? For instance, your peripheral photography?
Peripheral, yes. The peripheral photography has to do with the making of photographs of the outside surface of objects like pottery, for example, or ballistic casings of bullets and so on, in forensic situations, or on a more fun basis of people, which is what I've tried to share with the general photographic population. So peripheral photography is something that started in the late 1800s at the British Museum, where archaeologist photographers had to make photographs of pottery that came from Greece, that had inscriptions that went all the way around. And instead of making separate pictures of the pottery from one angle and another, they would do the peripheral photography, called sometimes rollout photography. You can kind of imagine why it's called rollout, because it's like if you were rolling this object on a piece of paper and you transfer the information as a printing press might. So they did this peripheral photography at that point. And then this technology was adapted by the racetrack industry to photograph photo finishes at racetracks. In fact, it was a photography here on the West Coast, Delmonico, I think, what's his name? It's Santa Anita in this neighborhood?
Yes.
And I think at that racetrack, he introduced this concept of moving film photography that produced better and more accurate results of the finish, order of finish in a race than any other previous technique. And it's still used to this day. Sure, in digital form, but the principle was established in the film era. So then, in addition to rollout or peripheral photography and this photo finish photography, the same technique can be used for other applications as well, such as, for example, the photographs from Mars. The earliest photographs from Mars that were done by the Viking landers were done essentially the same way, by looking at the Martian landscape one vertical line at a time, and then panning the camera or the sensor to cover the whole landscape. They were not worried about how long it took it to do that, but they wanted to be able to take really wide-angle photographs. So the cameras on Mars were able to cover 360 degrees. And not only that, they had two cameras, so they could do this in stereo as well. So it was a wonderful system. But so the applications for these cameras that might be called streak cameras or strip cameras, they're related essentially to strip chart recorders. And we're all familiar with the lie detector tests or the seismographs that plot a pen moving on moving paper. Well, these cameras do the same thing, but instead of using pens, they use light. And so they open up all kinds of avenues for scientific recording or for general purpose photography. So that's the area that I contribute to the seminar with, particularly in high-speed applications. But personally, I've also been looking at low-speed applications, such as the photograph of this, was it the young lady that you showed here?
Yes.
Which is a rollout or peripheral photograph of a person who's sitting on a turntable and being rotated while the camera looks at her head one line at a time. And this was actually done with a digital version. But I've also done it with film-type cameras.
What is the difference? Do you find it's more difficult with digital? Did you have to reinvent something in order to get this effect?
No, but the linear sensors that are used in cameras like this were not easy to, I shouldn't say not easy, they were not inexpensive.
Okay.
And it wasn't until I happened to run across in a surplus store of a salvaged scanning instrument that I was able to modify it. Rube Goldberg assembled it. I assembled myself a digital version of these linear scanning cameras. But after that, it's after you have it, it's kind of easy to use, and I probably made pictures like this. I particularly like to do children because they get into the spirit of what these are. They have to stand on a turntable and they kind of spun around, but they figure out very quickly what is going on, and they figure out that if they go around more than once, then they can change their expression from one to another, or they can even do it while they're moving around. And they don't expect to be, they don't expect a flattering photograph necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
And they are delighted if it's distorted and if it's weird, and they think that that's just the greatest thing. And this technology lends itself to that. So I go to science fairs and so on, and I essentially offer this opportunity to them. I make a print such as you showed, and they get to take that print away. And if I'm interested in the photograph for some reason or other, and I think that you've hosted the Little Faces show here,
I did.
and those pictures were acquired in that particular fashion. So I get a digital version. If they want a digital file, I give it to them. But they get to walk away with a sample print. So it's a great conversation. It's an icebreaker. It's a conversation piece, and it's a unique photograph.
Absolutely.